Hello, my name is Michaela, and welcome to a study guide video on Annabeth Chase. Basically, I want to explain how you can emulate Annabeth's best character qualities in order to have a better academic experience, how you absorb information, take in the world, etc. So this is my third video that I'm making for study guides. I've done one for Rory Gilmore, Hermione Granger, and now Annabeth. And the thing that's different about Annabeth compared to Rory and Hermione is we don't really see her studying in that quintessential, stereotypical academic format of like sitting down at the library, taking out a book, and taking notes. That's just not Annabeth. 99% of the time she's out like stabbing a monster or something. So this is definitely an extrapolation of sorts because I wanted to take Annabeth's best qualities and kind of put them in a real world format in ways that you can apply those same qualities without obviously having to go out and look for monsters, because that's just not feasible. I've drawn from the Percy Jackson books, took quotes from there. Let's start with some of the more conspicuous qualities probably. The very first thing that you can do to improve maybe your studying experience or how well you do in school is to read nonfiction about your passions. And the key here is nonfiction, because we often see Annabeth reading a lot about architecture. She knows so much that she's granted the privilege of rebuilding Mount Olympus. If you want to feel well versed in a particular subject, it can be any subject, but like find your niche that you're really interested in and just go hog wild on it. Find out all that you can, check out books from the library so that you become an expert in this thing that you're passionate about. When Percy first meets Annabeth, he says that he tries to see what she was reading, but he couldn't make out the title. He says, "I thought my dyslexia was acting up, then I realized the title wasn't even English. The letters looked Greek to me. I mean, literally Greek. There are pictures of temples and statues in different kinds of columns, like those in an architecture book." It'll also just be like a huge bragging point for you if you ever need a party trick or something. Be like, oh, quiz me on the geography of Romania because I know everything about it. Just something entirely random like that. Okay, next is to bring a book with you in case you get bored. Also, in The Lightning Thief, we read that Annabeth carried a book on famous classical architecture written in ancient Greek to read when she got bored. It's actually a really good idea because you never know when you're going to be sitting around aimlessly, idling, nothing to do, and you might want to have a book that you can just pull out and take out and start reading so that you can entertain yourself. Visit and explore culture thoroughly. When Percy, Annabeth, and Grover go to St. Louis, they go up to the Arch. Annabeth is like thoroughly interested in it. Obviously that is because it's a piece of architecture, but she's not just there to get the job done. She actually wants to stay there for hours. The book reads, Annabeth kept talking about structural supports and how she would have made the windows bigger and designed a see-through floor. She probably could have stayed up there for hours, but luckily for me, the park ranger announced that the observation deck would be closing in a few minutes. Okay, so yes, so she doesn't stay up there for a few hours, but she could. So channel that. When you go to a heritage center, cultural history, whatever, really absorb what you're seeing there. Take the time to look at everything and appreciate what it is. It's a good way to really soak up everything you can when you visit these types of tourist attractions. I was gonna say tourist trap. That's not true for a lot of places. The next one is about applying what you know to the real world. Annabeth does this all the time because out on quests, she has to apply her knowledge. Like it's just kind of, it happens in the moment. When she and Percy are riding the Tunnel of Love, what's it called? I don't remember what it's called. She shouts at Percy, simple physics, force times the trajectory angle, and Percy's like, fine. And then they jump on Annabeth's spark. I just like this because I think that while we're studying math and physics and a lot of those things, it can often kind of feel while you're doing your homework, like, what am I gonna even use this for? Like, am I ever gonna need this in my life? Not that we're going to need to jump from an abandoned water ride through the air, like that's not going to happen to us, but still being able to see where you can apply what you're learning to the real world is just a good practice. And then it's kind of like what Annabeth does all the time. She's always using it in the real world. Be resilient and try things again. Annabeth doesn't have a good relationship with her father and she wrote him a letter, tried again. While this can also set you up for disappointment, because again, this is fiction. Like Annabeth's situation probably for a lot of people wouldn't have worked out in real life because that's the reality of things. But it's also kind of proof that if you do try again, even when you think all hope is lost, something good can come out of it. If you're feeling discouraged about something, think about that resilience Annabeth has in trying something again, even if she feels like she's already done it enough times that there's no hope. Next is to know your history. This happens probably dozens of times throughout the series. But an example is when Percy yells to Annabeth that there are too many. How do you get rid of them? She stabbed at a pigeon with her knife. Hercules used noise, breath spells. He scared them away with the most horrible noise he could. There's a phrase everyone's heard of, like history repeats itself. In knowing your history, whether it's of your local area, your country, and especially world history, is so important just because we need to know what our mistakes have been and what our successes have been and who we are as humanity. For Annabeth, it helps her out a lot, knowing a lot about Greek history and the myths of all the heroes. For the real world, I think that it's just a good idea to know history, to be familiar with all these topics that come up in our careers and conversations at school and just problems that we have from day to day. Next is to open up to those that you care about. This happens all the time between Annabeth and Percy. She's very candid with him once they become friends, and she tells him about things that are bothering her, stresses about being a hero, and if you're a student and you're struggling with workload or something, open up to people and just don't feel isolated in whatever you're going through. And you don't even have to be a student to adhere to this advice. Visit the library at your school. Annabeth likes the library, as we learn in Sea of Monsters. Her eyes brighten, and she says, your library is amazing. Yes, indeed, Cece said. The best knowledge of the past 3 millennia. Anything you want to study, anything you want to be, my dear. Which is very true. Anything you want to study, anything you want to be, a library has it. Learn how to control your flaws. What are your vices while studying? What distracts you? What keeps you from being the best version of yourself that you can be? Annabeth discovers this because she intentionally listens to the sirens, and then she tells Percy about hubris. This is such a sage thing for a young adult middle grade book, because knowing yourself and understanding your flaws is so important to overcoming your obstacles in life. I mean, this is obviously a good idea just for even job interviews. You need to know what your weaknesses are, because inevitably you're going to be asked that. But in general, I think that you can get more work done when you know yourself. Strength, this is obviously in a physical sense and a mental sense, because Annabeth is a crazy athletic person, but then also she's just very strong with resolution. She holds up the sky that Atlas held up, which again, this is mythological fiction. None of us are going to be holding up the sky anytime soon, but still looking to Annabeth as a role model and how we can be more resolute in our lives, however heavy the burdens might feel, whether it's in work or school that you're dealing with right now, or family life, friends. It's inspiration to keep on holding up to it and don't let it crush you. Place a deep value on learning. Don't learn just for the sake of having a high GPA. Learn for the sake of learning. Annabeth has been studying architecture for years. She says, I know Daedalus's labyrinth better than anybody. And then Percy's like, from reading about it. And she says, well, yes. He says, that's not enough. And she says, it has to be. It isn't. Are you going to help me or not? And then what's interesting is then in another passage, Annabeth climbs out of the helicopter. Percy stares at her in awe and says, I didn't know you could fly a helicopter. Annabeth says, neither did I. My dad's crazy into aviation. Plus, Daedalus had some notes on flying machines. I just took my best guess on the controls. So I think this is just really good evidence for putting something into practice. Like, you don't want to remain in the theoretical. Annabeth's successes come when she takes what she's read and puts it into practice. Practice using your memory. It's just a good thing, I think. I'm sure there's probably some sort of correlation that shows preventative measures for memory loss can probably include like practicing your memory on a day-to-day basis. We're told that Annabeth's known for her memory. She doesn't forget things. So just practice using it. Use your best judgment to go against tradition. So think outside the constraints of expectations and tradition. It's not that I'm saying like break the rules, destroy tradition, because a lot of rules and tradition can be good, but a lot can also be bad. So kind of use your best judgment for that, because when it comes to bad traditions and bad rules, Annabeth isn't afraid to break them. She's like, well, I'm going to think outside the box here. It's what helps her when she takes on her own quest in the 4th book, and she's told that she can't have more than 2 companions for her quest. But she's like, no, I'm going to take more than that. And it's just also a good idea to maybe know those boundaries. Which ones should you respect, and then which ones should you question? Next is to trust yourself. In the labyrinth, they come up to these 8 tunnels, and they're like, well, which way do we go? Annabeth says, that way. And Percy's like, well, how do you know? And she says, deductive reasoning. So she is just guessing, but she's very confident. She trusts herself, and this often gets her places. If she were to hesitate, it wouldn't help her. So if you're in school, trust yourself, trust your gut, give yourself more credit than you might otherwise, because often you will be right, or at least you're onto something, and it's just important to have that self-assurance, or else you probably won't take risks in life. Challenge yourself. This is so important just to enrich your school experience and your life in general. When they come across the Sphinx, it's asking a bunch of trivia questions rather than riddles, and Annabeth is kind of insulted by it. She says, this is an insult to my intelligence. I won't answer these questions. This is, I think, one of the best things that you can do for yourself as a student, is to make sure that you're challenging yourself. Because if you want to learn more, take exciting classes, do better as a student, you have to challenge yourself. Just more so that if you want to excel, you've got to make it harder for yourself. Commit yourself to long-term projects without giving up. Annabeth spends months working at Daedalus's laptop. And I think that this just really is a testament to her resolve and her focus. It's really easy to start projects and then not finish them, whether that's your own thing that you're doing or something for school. If you can kind of think about this and think about how Annabeth takes on these projects, then it might help you to, if you're writing a book, for instance, to keep pushing at it, even if it's been months, even years maybe. Like, keep working at it. because eventually you will reach the finish line. Desire knowing when you don't know. In either book 4 or book 5, I think it's book 5. Yeah, Annabeth sounded really frustrated. She hated not knowing. This is when she admits out loud, I don't know. Those words are hard to admit sometimes. I don't know. You know, it feels like a flaw. It feels like a mistake that you've made. But I think it's also a really good drive. It's a way to drive yourself if you don't like not knowing. And seeing this in Annabeth, while this definitely can be a flaw if you take it to an extreme of getting angry with yourself if you don't know something rather than as motivation to learn it, in this case, I see it as a way to kind of in our own lives, in classes, if you don't know something, rather than feeling like you want to give up on it, instead go to office hours and let your annoyance for not knowing push you to know. Feel comfortable with leadership. There are 1,000 examples of Annabeth being a leader. She's not afraid of it. She can speak in front of others. She can guide others, set a good example for others, and getting more comfortable with that, whether it's public speaking. Public speaking you're definitely going to need in the future. So definitely get better at this and don't let it unnerve you. This one's much more ambiguous, I think, but there's a passage in book 5 when Annabeth says, I ran away when I was 7. Then with Luke and Talia, I thought I'd found a family, but it fell apart almost immediately. What I'm saying, I hate it when people let me down, when things are temporary. I think that's why I want to be an architect. Recognizing that things in life are temporary, they're not going to be around forever. And what can we do to enjoy the moment? How can we enjoy the present? And how can we also implement things in our lives, like Annabeth wanting to be an architect, that give us a sense of security? And the last one is to be prepared for anything that might come up. I think I'm jumping back here to a different book, but Percy notices that Annabeth comes up to him. She was dressed in black camouflage with her celestial bronze knife strapped to her arm and her laptop bag slung over her shoulder, ready for stabbing or surfing the internet, whichever came first. This is just a very comedic image that we're given right here, but I think that it's also just kind of good, even though I'm not talking about having a knife to be prepared. No one needs to be stabbing anyone, but just being prepared for whatever comes up in your life. So packing in your backpack whatever you might need. Yeah, this is my list of emulating Annabeth Chase. I am so excited because tomorrow the Percy Jackson series comes out for television, and I have loved this book series since I was like 7 or 8 years old. By the time that I post this on YouTube, it'll have been out for at least a week because I've been slow to edit lately. But I'm really just looking forward to watching this. Thank you so much for watching this video. Enjoy watching the new show and have a great week.